Hey guys, GWS here to do another video on my Trump endorsement. We're going to go in a little bit of a different direction though. I think it's probably the most important question to ask of somebody like me is, why did I leave the left wing? This is going to be a three-parter, unfortunately, because there's just so many points here that I have to run through, and it's just hard to do stuff and then have retakes and all of that, and I'm just not into doing the video editing that much. So, we're going to do this in three parts. So, just to kind of go through what the parts are, so that if you want to skip to one particular one, first part's going to be my pre-Obama history and Obama's first term. Those things tie in together strongly. And then the second term of Obama, which is when things pretty much go downhill. Second term of Obama, and then pre-Trump. And then pretty much post-Trump, which will pretty much go like after I'm finished voting for left-wingers. And basically the aftermath. And then either in another section or as a part of this series, we will go into what it would take for me to vote for a Democrat again. And then we'll go over some, like black sheep, like Tulsi Gabbard, who I do support. But, so first of all, we're going to go through, like, my history, both pre-Obama and then Obama's first term, when it starts to get a little bit rough and disturbing. So, basically, as a kid, naturally, I was a left-winger. As a left-winger in school and in, like, early university, which, I liked Bill Clinton. I did not like the Monica Lewinsky thing. Even at the time, I didn't, because it's just like, why are you trying to just get rid of a president for sexual favors? Like, the guy didn't rape a girl or anything. But, I think the bigger thing to talk about regarding any young person being a left-winger is just the institutional impact. Now think about it. Like, when you were in school, or even if you're still in school, basically it tries to present itself as a competent bureaucracy, like nearly everything. Like, you're in this big, beautiful building with all these different departments. You have your school counselors, you have your principals, you have your parent-teacher conferences. You have all these things that give the appearance of a bureaucracy working like clockwork, right? You're going to classes, you're structured in periods where you go from one area to the other. You have your fixed lunch periods, which you can often even get free lunches if you're poor enough. And basically, it presents itself as something that works well, and there's a lot of children who will extrapolate that. Well, why can't we get a government to work like this? Why can't we get a government to provide everything? And that's kind of how I thought at the time. I wasn't a huge left-winger, but I was pretty, I was moderate to solid left at the time. And that's part of what I blame on that, right? And then you had 9/11, which was basically kind of a brief pause in that, because we all became patriots. We all wanted to kick some terrorist ass at the time. And, for all the things that could be said about the Iraq War, the fact is most people, left and right, did support the war before it happened, and I was kind of included in that. But then after that, I started having some questions, and actually the earliest article the earliest article recorded that's political that I wrote and that I can especially present here is a 2004 blog I wrote on the Iraq War. Somehow it still exists, but where I start questioning, like, maybe the war was fought for good reasons. I'd later change my opinion on this, but maybe it was fought for good reasons. We just didn't have the right guy in charge. And the guy in charge, being Bush, just being like super, talking about American muscle and shit. Like, that's not the way to look at any war. You know what I mean? So, you got that. And then John Kerry comes in, and then the Iraq War just really starts taking a bad turn. They start declaring Code Orange, and it's just, people are tired of war, and I was just tired of the war. I was tired of the news about the war, about nothing getting done. Mission accomplished, yet we're still there over a year later. And in Afghanistan, like 3 years later. So, I voted for John Kerry. And I supported John Kerry. I thought John Kerry was just, if nothing else, he was going to not escalate the wars, and he was going to get us out of the wars. That's what I thought. And when John Kerry didn't win, I got very, very upset, and even briefly delved into conspiracies of the Diebold voting machines, etc. And then, to add on to that, going more and more to the left wing, I heard of Obama. And, at first I didn't even know who Obama was. Like, I just thought he was just a fringe candidate. But then I started listening to him, and I was like, say what you want about Obama, but he is one of the best speakers this country's ever had. And it really is just a testimony of, like, how speeches don't necessarily translate to competency, but we're going to get into that. But with Obama's speeches, we've just gone through years of war, the Patriot Act, all this subversion of our civil liberties, and here comes this guy promising he's going to bring the country together. He's going to hire bipartisan administration. He's going to do all this stuff, like get rid of the lobbyists, and like he supported climate change action, which at the time I supported climate change action because I was a little bit ignorant of the issue of climate change. We'll get into that can of worms. I actually have videos on my channel on a lot of this, but most people, I don't think, are going to want to dig into my disorganized hodgepodge videos to look at it. But I do have climate change positions, and I can post where I've posted about climate change, right? So there's that. And I supported Obama. But there's also a guy running I initially supported mainly because a professor of mine supported him too, John McCain. John McCain, war hero. That's pretty much all I knew about him at the time. And this is when I just started kind of paying more attention to politics. I was watching CNN of all networks every day. Oh boy, on that. But I considered CNN to be a valid news source at the time. And I watched CNN, and I listened to Obama, and I listened to McCain, and one thing that rubbed me the wrong way about McCain, still does, but especially at the time, was let's go stay in Iraq for 100 years. 50 years, maybe 100. That was the famous thing, and Obama really got him on that one, but it was like, why are we going to stay in Iraq for 100 years? Like, I was getting tired of it after 4 years, 5 years. Like, why are we going to stay there 100? And then here's Obama promising he's going to get us out of Iraq. He's going to pull the troops out immediately, day one. That was his promise. And, we were going to build an administration based on diplomacy. And I believed him. I fell into all of this uniting, uplifting talk, and I fell with the herd. And I still have to live with it to this day. But at the time, I did support it. And, like I said, at the time, I was a big believer in climate change, too, and that also helped. But it was like, then, all of a sudden, Obama gets elected. The first thing he does is hires Rahm Emanuel as his chief of staff. Rahm Emanuel was a very crooked politician from Chicago, and I started kind of having questions. Like, here's this guy, he promised to end lobbying, yet he hires Rahm Emanuel? And, like, at that moment, I still supported Obama, mainly because I was in denial. But that's when I started having a little bit of questions about Obama. Like, what was this guy who he said he was? And then I started hearing more stuff about the Phil Berg situation, his birth certificate, and he was blocking it from coming out. And I was just wondering, why is he blocking this from coming out? And just to be clear, no, I'm not a birther. But when you're trying to block documents from coming out about yourself, like, I started to wonder if Obama wasn't being as truthful, as he wanted to portray himself as being. And then you had Obamacare. Obamacare was an absolute flop. Like, picture this. Like, Obama ran against Hillary Clinton on not having a mandate on his health care plan. Hillary Clinton's plan contained a mandate. It was a mandated system, like the late 1990s style, when Bill Clinton was hashing it out with Newt Gingrich. And Hillary Clinton was presenting that same thing, and Obama was saying, you're proposing a mandate, I'm not going to propose a mandate on people. And so, when in 2009, the Democrats who controlled every house put the mandate in there, we started having problems. Because now, there were promises being broken. The lobbyists weren't out of there. The wars weren't being ended. He kept delaying the end of the Iraq war. He promised to end it day one. Keep that in mind. He promised to close Gitmo on day one. Keep that in mind. None of this is being done. But he kept appearing on TV. He kept appearing on ESPN. And there was a point where I just snapped. I was with a family member who was a conservative. And we were at a gym. And we were looking at the little TV up there in the locker room. And here Obama is yet again. And I just snapped. I'm like, what is this guy doing on TV when he's done absolutely nothing? When he's broken every promise he's kept? When he's hired people like Rahm Emanuel and other lobbyists in his administration? Like, what's going on here? Like, why aren't the things being done? And that was really when I started seriously questioning. That's kind of when, like, the downfall actually began. I kind of snapped out of my little Obama spell that I was in, and I started questioning things. And the more I looked up, the more I started questioning. Even on climate change, my position was changing as I started learning more and more, as I started doing more and more research on climate change. Right? But I was still a halfway believer in climate change even at the time. Then you had the racial division. Trayvon Martin, later Michael Brown, which is later than, I think that was his second term, but it kind of falls in the same category of, like, when you come out before a trial, before there's any justice, and you say Trayvon Martin could have been my son, like that statement alone probably set us back 10 years in the racial division. Like, before any justice, and then when all the facts of the case come out, Trayvon Martin, turns out the kid likes to fight, the kid likes to watch people bleed, and then here was a fight he got into, and when it was dark and when it was raining, he's beating the shit out of a guy, and then he gets shot. Like, when the facts come out, turns out it's not always clear cut as the court of public opinion wants you to think. In the Michael Brown case, it's even more clear. Like, the guy literally tried to take the cop's gun, and then got away from the cop and tried to, quote unquote, charge. Now, charge, of course, like, very loosely used by cops all the time to justify their actions. But the fact, like, we know that this guy was a maniac who was trying to take a cop's gun from him. And so, I think that cop, while he may not have needed to use force, he may have felt he needed to at the immediate moment to defend himself, right? And that's why the case I don't even think the case lasted a day. It was just clear cut. But, and this is just all the stuff in Obama's first term. I was still kind of solidly left-wing, but as you're going to see in the next parts, like, that's going to erode extraordinarily quickly, especially after the election of Mitt Romney, who was a very weak candidate. I was no supporter of Romney's. Like, that was kind of a, I'm not voting for either of these fuckers kind of deal. Like, Mitt Romney was just a liar, a joke, an ignoramus. And, of course, I still feel that way. Especially given his dumbass stances. But we're not going to go too much into that. So, I'm going to put a cut here. And in the next one, we're going to talk about Obama's second term, which includes a lot more wars, a lot more strife. And then we're going to talk about pre-Trump, Trump's beginnings, my thoughts on him initially. Then we're going to talk about post-Trump, and then we're going to talk about what the left wing can do to get my support back, if it's even possible for them to do that. But anyhow, I'm going to cut it here. Thank you guys for listening. God bless. And I will see you in part 2 of this series.